After that loss to the New England Patriots, the Chicago Bears need to do something to show everyone that this is unacceptable, whether that's firing an assistant coach, firing a coordinator, or for the first time in Chicago Bears history, firing a head coach in the middle of a season. They have to send the right message that this is going to change and this won't be tolerated any longer.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. On the show today, we look at where we're picking up the pieces after what feels to me like a rock-bottom loss to the New England Patriots, where Ryan Poles and the Bears organization has to send a message with some kind of firing, some kind of accountability, some kind of change that shows everyone that this is not okay and that will not be the same next week. They're not just going to keep trying to do the same thing over and over with the same people. And I want to get into some of the why behind that and really why this move is so critical beyond just the frustration of having lost another game. But we'll also go more specifically into some of the issues offensively, try and diagnose how much is it for backups on the offensive line versus Shane Waldron versus receivers making mistakes, Caleb Williams making mistakes as well. There's a lot of blame to go around, and we'll try and piece together what feels appropriate in that side of the ball. And then I also want to keep tabs on this defense as well. That keeps showing some cracks here and leaves me particularly worried as you look ahead to 3 straight NFC North games in the schedule, that if they're giving up 19 points like this to the Patriots, what's going to happen with Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and then the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold after that. But I want to dig in a little bit deeper into the fire a coach conversation here, because it's not a revolutionary take after a bad loss right there. You're going to hear plenty of people talk about, yes, the Bears should fire a coach. That's not bold here. But what I want to go a little bit deeper behind that of like, it's more than just, hey, we're frustrated because the team's losing. Right? I want to get into some of the why and why it makes sense for an organization that really doesn't do very much of that in its history. Certainly has never fired a head coach midseason, and rarely do you see them can coordinators midseason. And I realize recording this podcast, on Sunday night, at the time I'm recording this, no one has been fired yet. It's possible they fire somebody, Monday morning or sometime during the day on Monday. So I apologize if, you're listening to this after they've already made a move, but that's why I want to get into sort of the why it matters whether they do or don't. Like, this is why it's still a good idea for them to do so. That it has to show, they have to show the players and the fan base that this is unacceptable and that there is accountability for people who perform poorly. Right? The players hear the messaging from the coaches all offseason, through training camp, preseason, into the regular season every week, right? Like, we're going to hold you guys accountable. If you're not hustling, if you're not out there doing your job, like, you could get benched, or we're going to be hard on you. We're going to yell at you. We're going to chew you out on tape when you play poorly. We're going to be tough on you with the idea that it pushes you to grow and be better and be a better player in the long run. And that also is what's best for the success of the football team. But when they keep hearing those messages from the coaches of, you're not doing good enough, you're not playing well enough, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, the players start to look back at the coach and not out loud, but say to themselves, well, you're doing that wrong. You're doing this wrong. You're calling that play in that situation, and you're handing the ball off to your backup offensive lineman here, or you're throwing behind the line of scrimmage there, or you're putting your defense in this coverage on Hail Mary, and you're putting on the play before the Hail Mary. You didn't challenge the play there. You wasted that timeout here. Like, all of a sudden, you're yelling at me and telling me that I need to be better. But who's there making sure that you're getting better? Where's the accountability for you? How come, you're not having to correct mistakes, or you're not being punished for your mistakes, but you keep punishing us for our mistakes. Like there has to be some sign that the accountability there is mutual and goes in multiple directions. And it's not just do what I say even when I'm wrong about what I'm saying. And I think if you take it even a step higher, like if I'm Ryan Poles, at some point, firing one of these coaches, whether it's the head coach, the whole staff, or a coordinator right now, or an assistant coach, like that's a step towards protecting Ryan Poles' job security too. The worse you let this get, the less stability Ryan Poles is going to have. And especially, I think, when it comes to Caleb Williams. But Ryan Poles' long-term job security is tied to the success of that number one overall pick quarterback. You know, even if the team loses this season, Ryan Poles probably still keeps his job. And Ryan Poles keeps his job as long as the Caleb Williams stuff continues to trend in the right direction. As long as Caleb looks like the right quarterback, Ryan Poles should be able to survive for quite some time. The moment it appears, the moment it looks like the Bears got the quarterback pick wrong, which again, it's not the case right now, but in the future, if we get to a point where we say, yeah, you know what, not the right quarterback, Ryan Poles is gone. I mean, he's not going to be allowed to go through another quarterback change like that in the future. So Ryan Poles' long-term job security depends on the development of Caleb Williams. And the longer you leave Caleb Williams in the hands of this coaching staff, the more you risk Caleb Williams' long-term development and therefore the long-term job security of Ryan Poles. So I think there's an argument to be made here that Ryan Poles firing, whether it's offensive coordinator Shane Waldron or offensive line coach Chris Morgan or eventually Matt Eberflus, like those are decisions that not only appease the fan base and maybe parts of the locker room as well, but also protect some of his job. Because if you continue to let Caleb get sacked 9 times in games like this, and you continue to not give Caleb Williams options against the blitz, and you continue to not put this offense in position to succeed, you wear down his development and you limit the chances that he becomes the quarterback you thought he could become when you drafted him with the number one overall pick. Like Ryan Poles acquires talent for this roster, and that's where his job kind of ends, and then it's up for the coaches to take it from there. But if the coaches can't maximize the talent and get the most out of the talent and develop the talent that Ryan Poles acquires, that hurts Ryan Poles' job security. So at some point, firing a coach, well, is a bad look for Poles for having hired the coach in the first place. Firing a coach and getting a right coach in there helps Ryan Poles too. And you just got to hope that he realizes that at some point, and we can have a separate conversation later about how much we trust Ryan Poles as a long-term GM of the Bears. I'm not off that ship just yet, but I am off we've been well off this coaching staff ship for a long time, and ship, to be clear there, for the FCC, coaching staff ship, not the S word, ship, like a boat. It's time for a change there, and I think Ryan Poles needs to realize that the longer he holds on with this coaching staff, the more he risks getting fired as well. And at some point, his personal interests and the team's best interests align more so than him being good buddies with Matt Eberflus and sharing an agent and all that stuff as well. So that's sort of like bigger picture organizationally why a firing makes sense. But then I want to needle down a little bit more on, okay, like here's why there are problems on offense that certainly justify an offensive coaching staff change, and why there are now problems on defense as well that certainly breaks the facade of what you thought Matt Eberflus was standing on for his job security as well. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. They know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life, and it takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or painful losses to the New England Patriots. That's why 5 Hour Energy has created a new flavor. It's called the Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. It's the energy shot made for super fans like you, the fans who are first in the parking lot and last to leave the tailgate. We see you. And that's where you need a little bit of a boost, or maybe just something to pick you up after a bad loss. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. So whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long, and that's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com. Shipped nationwide. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the better way to do daily fantasy sports, because PrizePicks puts you in complete control. They set stat projections for every player, and you pick whether they perform more or less than their PrizePicks projection. So even if your team isn't winning on Sunday, you can still find some wins at PrizePicks. Other daily fantasy platforms have you set a lineup, and your lineup competes against 500 other lineups. You only really win if you get first place. With PrizePicks, you just get your picks right, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Whether it's Caleb Williams' passing yards or DeAndre Swift's rushing yards, Keenan Allen's receiving yards, Cole Kmet's receiving yards. That one's a tough one right now. Hey, you can play them all at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's an instant $50 whether your lineup is correct or not when you download the PrizePicks app. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL and play a $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. The most obvious place to look for a firing or to demand a firing is on the offensive coaching staff, because that has been clearly the biggest problem on this roster, the biggest disappointment on the roster, and also the most important thing when it comes to, Caleb Williams and developing that side of the ball. And a 3-point win, or 3 points in the loss, I should say, to the New England Patriots that follows only 9 against the Cardinals and 15 against the Commanders. You're going in the wrong direction, even as the opponents get worse as well. Like this is bad. I don't need to sit here and tell you that the offense is bad, but I want to sort of pull apart a little bit the offensive issues against New England, because it's easy to look at just this game in a vacuum, and if you ignore the season-long offensive struggles and say, oh, well, this week they had a backup left tackle, a backup left guard, a backup right guard, and a backup right tackle in this game. After Tevin Jenkins went out, they had 4 backups and then a center who was kind of your second choice to play center anyway. So it was a talent-deficient offensive line. And you could explain away 9 sacks by saying, yeah, that was just bad offensive line play. And I think it's more complicated than that. But that would be looking at this in just a vacuum. But we've seen over the course of the season these same trends week in and week out. And all the sacks they had last week from the Arizona Cardinals and the Washington Commanders before that. Like, Caleb Williams is getting his ass kicked out there, and it's not going well for anyone. And it's a big part of, but not the only part of, what's derailing this offense. I think it's, if you had to isolate the single biggest issue, I would say that's probably it, but it sure feels like play calling and just general offensive game plan stuff is right up there with it, because I thought there were stretches in this game where the offensive line played decently. Not well, but decently. Especially early on, it felt like there were a couple of sacks. The first couple of sacks there, and I don't have them all charted out or anything here, but where Caleb drops back to pass, steps up, looking, sacked, right? The first couple of sacks. There were certainly some bad sacks later in the game that were definitely on the offensive line, but early on in the game, it felt like it was more like coverage sacks, where Caleb doesn't have a hot route to throw to, doesn't have an underneath route to throw to, or no one's getting open. And in some cases, I think he was holding onto the ball a little bit too long early on as well. I think some of the sacks fall on Caleb Williams' shoulder for just, you got to throw it away. Or you can't, you thought he could escape but couldn't a couple of different times, where it's like, you want him to be confident, you want him to think they're never going to bring him down, but at some point, dude, you got to just throw it away, or you got to leave earlier, or you got to find somewhere to put the ball and not take sacks in some of those situations. There were a few of those that were on Caleb Williams. How you want to divvy up the 9, I didn't go through and rewatch each one, but I felt like a couple were on Caleb, a couple were on bad offensive line play, and a couple were on the play call for not having receivers open early or hot routes for Caleb Williams to throw to. And that's really the core of this issue, right? It's that combination of bad offensive line play, quarterback mistakes, and offensive play calling not helping him. That is what's wrong with this Bears offense, first and foremost. Then you can start to piece together. Then you can add in, okay, Keenan Allen doesn't block anybody on that third down swing pass to DJ Moore in the backfield. You add in, sometimes guys aren't running great routes and aren't always finishing plays through the whistle. And those are also problems too, but those fall a couple of notches short of everything we talked about there with the offensive line and the play calling and the quarterback there. And that's where it's okay, so then does firing Shane Waldron solve all that problem? I mean, I think it's more about sending a message of accountability rather than perfectly fixing the problem. It's more like saying this is unacceptable, so we have to do something different, even if that different doesn't fix the problem, because then, your interim offensive coordinator is probably then Thomas Brown, your passing game coordinator, who was previously the Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator, which is like not a super strong ringing endorsement of experience for him. But I don't know that firing Shane Waldron fixes the play calling issue right away, but at least it sends a message of something wrong. Same thing with okay, do you fire the offensive line coach Chris Morgan because that offensive line's been so bad? Okay, doesn't mean that next week the injured offensive linemen are all going to be healthy or that the backups are all going to play better, right? It just is a matter of sending a message that, hey, what we have been seeing from this team is not good enough there. Maybe over the course of the year, you could see some light changes, and maybe it's just sort of a faith and motivation thing, right? Like, okay, you're not firing, changing play callers or firing a line coach or whatever, isn't going to necessarily fix everything, but could the players look at it and go, okay, great, a breath of fresh air, something new, something different, something to buy into again, and say it's a different voice leading that room, or you feel like the guy who was leading that room wasn't leading you in the right direction, so it's easier to buy in on what the new guy is saying because he's not what the old guy was, and maybe there's the previous guy was, so maybe there's a little bit of a reinvigoration there, some new energy to the offense or the defense or whatever, wherever the Bears would make some kind of change. That to me feels like the purpose of a change to the coaching staff there, rather than Thomas Brown is going to be some genius play caller who fixes everything if you fire Shane Waldron. I don't think that's necessarily the case there, but it doesn't mean it's still not worth doing, right? Maybe you can find a way to get Cole Kmet more involved in the offense, to get DJ Moore targets that aren't just screen passes, to open up the running game a little bit more, and to get Caleb Williams to take fewer hits. I mean, maybe there's some benefit to be had there, but it's more about a message sending that, hey, the voices leading this right now are not leading it correctly, and that needs to then be significantly different moving forward, because otherwise, how embarrassing can this get? I mean, you lose to a 2-7 New England Patriots team. This feels like rock bottom, but doesn't mean you're going to have doesn't mean it's not going to still hurt the next couple of weeks if things go very poorly against your NFC North opponents. It just feels like there's such a laundry list of things that are wrong about the offense that it's hard to say that these same guys running the same offense across the board are going to be able to fix all 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these different things going poorly. Not that firing one guy is going to fix 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things, but at least it sends that right message to everyone involved that, hey, something's got to be better here. Because Caleb Williams needs better. And if the Bears want him to develop into the long-term quarterback they want him to be, they need something different. They need something better. They can't keep putting him out there and taking all these sacks and then leaving him in at the final 2 minutes of the game and taking a couple more sacks late in that situation. I mean, they were down 16 in back-to-back weeks. They're losing late in the game and they have him out there and he's still taking hits. At some point, he's literally going to get hurt. It's one thing to sort of stunt his development because they're building bad habits. It's another thing if he's injured and misses games and doesn't get to develop that way because your coaching staff is leaving him out there. So that's where it just feels overly abundantly necessary to make a coaching change somewhere, particularly on the offensive staff, if not higher up on this, because I think Matt Eberflus's standing is getting weaker and weaker too as this defense struggles more and more. So we'll kind of take a look at where they struggled against the Patriots in particular and how that leaves you concerned moving forward against some better offenses coming up on the schedule here in the next few weeks. Next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off, 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, you'll get a $30 reward card when you shop early, and you'll score an extra $30 off with our promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steaks, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, Locked On Bears listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code NFL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com, OMAHA steaks.com, and you can get an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet hits. So not only do you get the winnings from your $5 bet, but you get an extra $150 in bonus bets added into your account on top of all of that. Whether it's pregame betting the spread or the point total. Right now, the Bears are 5.5-point home underdogs for the Green Bay Packers game next week. Or you can bet live in-game as well, all in the same place. If you get that hunch, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If there was any justification for saving Matt Eberflus's job or keeping him around in the future, right, it was always going to be, well, his defense is so good and he's a good defensive coach. So, do you want to fire Matt Eberflus and risk losing the good defense, when your next coach could come in and have a bad defense and maybe not have a good offense? And okay, maybe he's worth keeping around just because he can work the defense, and you can keep kind of trying an offensive coordinator to see if you could find the right fit there. But the more this defense struggles in games like this against bad offenses, the less of any kind of excuse you can make for keeping Matt Eberflus around in the future. And again, this is one of those things where it's in a vacuum, you look at the score and say, okay, they only gave up 19 points. You like to think in most weeks in the NFL, your offense should be able to score more than 19 points. The Bears offense on the season is averaging, entering this week, was averaging 21 points per game. They were scoring enough to win games where you only give up 19 points. But I think the conversation's much more complicated than you only gave up 19 in this game. So what are you worried about the defense for? Well, for how it looked and how the game flow contributed to that and where this defense continues to get gashed. And if you're giving up 19 points to a New England Patriots offense that averages less than 16 points per game, the second lowest scoring offense in the NFL this season. If you're giving them 19 points, how many points are you going to give Green Bay? How many points are you going to give Detroit? How many points are you going to give Minnesota? I mean, that's where we need to really have some real concern here moving forward, because it's been multiple weeks now, really the last 3 games in a row, and some games prior to that, this run defense has fallen apart. The Bears are giving up over 5 yards per carry on the ground to, guys like Ramondre Stevenson, who, is a fine running back, but he's not a Pro Bowl caliber guy. And then, of course, James Conner gashes you quite a bit the week before that, and Brian Robinson before that. The Bears don't have answers up front. And I don't think it's just Andrew Billings being out for the year. Yes, that makes a big difference. It is a significant contributing factor, not having your big nose tackle in there. But even when Billings was in there, they gave up a bunch of rushing yards to the Commanders. And before he got hurt against the Cardinals, a bunch of rushing yards in that game too. And earlier in the season, a bunch of rushing yards to Jonathan Taylor and the Colts, to Tony Pollard and the Titans. I think even the Panthers and Rams had some rushing success in their games this season. There's a bigger problem here that it's not easy enough to just diagnose and say, it's because of the defensive tackles in general are playing poorly, and then the linebackers are getting blocked at the second level, and that's what's causing the problem. I think that's part of it. I think it's sort of a group thing, right? Part of it is Pickens and Dexter haven't been great against the run, and that's made your linebackers' jobs more difficult. But part of it is your linebackers haven't been super sharp either. They've overrun some gaps. They've fought around blocks instead of fighting through blocks. So give up yards and not, get to the ball carrier, and also tackling. Not getting guys down on that first contact, where it's not blatant obvious missed tackles, but it's when you first hit him, he gets 3 or 4 more yards before he actually goes down, where it's not really a missed tackle, but it's just not a hard tackle. It's he carries you for extra yards so that you hit him at 3 yards, but he gains 6, and it's not a missed tackle, but it's just not going well. I think the defensive ends are part of that too. It's everybody there up front. And then I think there's some of it that can be play calling as well, when sometimes Matt Eberflus will call certain plays that are run blitzes or pass blitzes that aren't really prepared for the other one. We saw it happen against the Commanders a couple weeks ago, and certainly against the Cardinals as well. They've had some bad moments there that play calling is a factor here. But then, you still have too many easy completions down the field, not in Jalen Johnson's coverage, but it feels like other guys have been a little bit more vulnerable, particularly Tyreek Stevenson has kind of been in and out of the lineup with Terrell Smith kind of rotating back and forth there. And obviously there's the off-field issues and then sort of the chirping and it's sort of on field, but away from the play that has kept Stevenson from really being focused. That leads you to want to make a change there, but putting a backup in there hasn't necessarily improved coverage on those plays either. So it's like, yeah, Drake May only threw for 184 yards and a touchdown. Wasn't like a great game, but it certainly was enough, right? Put them into field goal range multiple times and even got the touchdown in there. Like, it feels like there's a lot of cracks in this defense. And if Matt Eberflus isn't giving you an elite defense, then what is he giving you? Is he giving you anything? I mean, he's giving you a nice beard, nice hairstyle. I mean, whatever it might be, he looks nice. He's got the glow up, right? But that's about it. Like, he's supposed to be the defensive guy and the leadership locker room culture guy. And we're feeling the leadership locker room culture slip away. And now we're seeing the defense slip away a little bit. And maybe the defense can still bounce back. And I think they're still generally a good defense. They're just not as great as they were earlier this season and as great as maybe we thought they were. But they're still ranking, top 5 in points and top 15 in yards and stuff. Like, they're not a bad group, but they're just not elite. And then at that point, what is the point of keeping Matt Eberflus around? Again, I don't think they're gonna fire Eberflus during the season. I think he's a guy who's safe enough from an organizational standpoint that don't like to make mid-season head coaching changes. And I don't think you're going to see any kind of is there any point in firing an assistant coach on the defense? Like, I don't think that really changes anything. And I think the defensive assistants generally do a pretty good job. Your D-line coach, Travis Smith, has developed some guys there. Your cornerbacks coach, John Hoke, has been really good as well. Safeties coach, Andre Curtis, has been around a little bit. Like, they're not the biggest part of the problem here. To me, the defensive struggles are more indicative of Matt Eberflus, where it's like, oh man, like, what is he giving you then? And what is he going to have to stand on if they have exit interviews or at the end of the year that say, okay, right, like, it's like the movie Office Space. Like, what is it you say you do here exactly? Like, how do you answer that question? Because it's not locker room culture right now, and it's not defense right now. It's not timeouts. It's not game management. It's not public speaking. Like, we're running out of any sort of redeeming qualities for Matt Eberflus as a head coach at this moment, and that's a scary place to be. So hopefully at some point the Chicago Bears make the right decision, even if it's not a decision made today, but maybe at some point in the near future. If the Bears make a coaching change, you can be sure we'll break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Even as the team stinks right now, we're not going anywhere. We'll be here 5 days a week to, if not help you feel better about the team, at least give you something to chew on here, some sort of direction, some sort of way forward. We'll find some hope. We'll find some optimism. Hey, I mean, you still got talent on this roster. There's still ways to go, and you never know. Maybe a coaching change could give them a little boost and play a little better, or maybe things are going to be a little bit rough for a little while here. But whether it's a therapy session to get you through the week or a pep rally to get you through the week, either way, Locked On Bears is here for you to get another opportunity to bear down.